Everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar. My name is Alexis Batulis with Columbus US, and today we are thrilled to present our ColumbusCare Showcase, a Columbus webinar on Microsoft Azure modernization. We started the call by putting everyone on mute, so if you have any questions during today's presentation, please use the question box on the upper right-hand side of the screen to ask any questions that may come up. At the end, we'll have time for a Q&A with our presenter. Finally, we are recording this session and we'll be sending a link to all attendees within an hour after this live webcast. Now I'm excited to introduce your presenter today, Chase Anderson, Cloud Solutions Architect at Columbus. So without further ado, Chase, I'll hand it over to you to get us started.
Thanks so much, Alexis, and thanks everyone for joining. I know it's always fun to take an hour out of the day to talk through modernization, but hopefully we can find some points that'll make this a little easy for you guys to find some steps that'll benefit your business, and the time will be valuable. So again, the topic is infrastructure management and modernization, and really the key that I'm looking to bring across the folks here is finding some tips and some tricks and some small ways to start and direction for the vision that you're looking to accomplish in terms of your IT infrastructure and your modernization path. So again, I'm Chase Anderson. I'm based here in Atlanta. I've been with Columbus only since February, but I've been in the technology space for about 8 years. And looking forward to chatting with you guys today. So without further ado, let's get to the topics. I'll let you guys read through this. Really, there are kind of a few main topics that we're focusing on here. Generally kind of an overall overview and again, kind of positioning that target. What is that endpoint that we should look to in terms of modernization in our journey? Then taking a look back, line of business and legacy applications. How are we going to migrate and continue working on what we've got in place that's mission critical to our business? This section, modern workplace, really we just wanted to present and provide you guys with some tips for making use of, for instance, Microsoft 365 and some of the licensing that you may already have, and finding ways to make better use of those types of tools to bring value. And then this kind of last grouping is business continuity, security, operational support. Really, these are key elements to continuing to achieve that vision and driving towards that modernization and making the benefits to the org. But before we get started, so just wanted to frame this for everyone on the call. So we know that this has been a crazy year for everyone. It's been a little painful for most. And this has really served to highlight, the need for the agility that the cloud brings to the table, that modernization brings to the table, both for how you interact with your customers and also how your employees and your colleagues and yourself are able to work on behalf of your organization. So one of the key things to consider is how modernization is not only, how you're interacting with your customers, but also how your employees and your teams are able to achieve their objectives and contribute. And yeah, the last piece I'll leave you with before we dive in is, change is scary, but irrelevance is worse, right? So there are ways that we can find inroads to taking those steps and start making the path more accessible to you guys. And I hope that's what we'll bring forward today. So talking through modernization and what we mean by that, really what we're saying when we're talking IT modernization is how do we get rid of all this over encumbrance that's wearing us down in terms of the hardware on premises, dealing with networking and dealing with storage and file servers and et cetera. You guys get the picture. The future state that we're aiming at is, hey, how can we get as much as possible out of the back office, out of the server room and into a cloud environment where we can then continually make better and better use of the new and technological advancements that come inherently with these types of solutions. We're talking primarily today about Azure, about Microsoft 365, some ISVs that may be involved with your journey, and then how Columbus can layer across that and bring the value for your organization. So the end state that we see is, hey, look, you can basically look at a path to completely get rid of a bunch of these tasks and a bunch of these problems and issues, and really move to a modern solution that'll enable your customers, enable your staff, and enable yourselves to achieve more. So again, one of the first topics that we wanted to touch on, just to kind of give the framework, is legacy application migration. So I just want to share with you guys a little bit about kind of the cloud, about Azure, about how that works and how that can look, hopefully to make it a little bit easier to conceptualize if folks here haven't started taking these types of steps towards moving maybe legacy applications and those types of workloads to the cloud. So again, on the left side, this is the image that we have of that server room, right, and the ugliness that can occur back there. This is where your organization is handling everything on premises. You've got to deal with the hardware, the networking, the servers, the virtualization. So taking that first step and using the infrastructure as a service model, for instance, in Microsoft Azure, means that a big chunk of that just gets taken care of for you. Just using, by nature of the cloud, the networking, the storage, the servers, the virtualization, all that stuff is accomplished. And basically you just focus on the pieces that are more relevant, the operating systems up to the application. The platform as a service takes that a step further, right? A lot more of this gets handled. And then on the far right side, we've got the software as a service model, where maybe if you move from a legacy ERP to, for instance, Business Central or Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations, then everything kind of below the actual utilization of the application is handled on the back end, right? So it's just kind of this stair-step path to modernization and the different steps along the way that can work. And we see a lot of customers, with some fingers in each of these buckets, right? So a lot of companies, maybe they have on-premises apps that they haven't even started moving yet. Maybe they have applications in Azure. Maybe they're using some platform as a service tools and software as a service, ISVs, et cetera, for some of their workloads. And that's perfectly fine. And we think that that's, obviously for most companies, that's going to be a phase in the journey. And that may be, that may make sense for a short, medium, or long term, but just painting the picture and understanding what those phases can look like, I think is important to having the conversations about what workloads are cloud ready, what workloads are set to move. And then another point on this topic is between Azure and Microsoft 365. So Azure is Microsoft's cloud platform that allows you to move those applications and off your on-premises hardware and into the cloud. And Microsoft 365 is their software as a service platform that encompasses a great many types of functionality. So it's everything from those Office applications. It can include security capabilities, compliance capabilities. There's a ton there. Between the two, your business can go from strictly on-premises to a near future-proof model of getting most of those workloads into the cloud and finding new and better ways to drive efficiency. So we're looking at this as, hey, cure the disease that has not yet happened. So we all know what happened earlier this year, and how that strained a lot of IT resources. Who knows what's going to happen next year, right? So from our perspective, it makes the most sense to go ahead and take the steps that you can towards modernization and utilizing those tools that are available. And in that path, so we wanted to talk through with Microsoft 365, for instance, a few of those types of workloads that I mentioned that not every company is taking advantage of. So if you've moved to Microsoft 365 or Office 365, you've already taken that first step. And then fully unlocking the value of Microsoft 365 is something that Columbus is seeking with our customers, to help people understand, hey, how can we better utilize the licensing that we already have, or how can we right size our licensing and then make sure we're taking advantage of these easy and fast and rapid and effective ways to drive towards that next phase of our business. So I'll give you 3 examples here. One of them is mobile device management. So inherent in certain licensing types with Microsoft 365, you can get endpoint manager, and that includes mobile device management. And basically this, if you guys aren't doing this currently, this is a way that you can utilize, configurations and compliance settings that allows your organization to take control of your corporate assets, to take control of your data, enforce policies that kind of restrict the use of data in certain ways, and enforce compliance when, for instance, your employees are bringing their own device, when people are using their own cell phones and their own laptops and their own, blenders. No, I'm just kidding. But using their own devices to work with corporate data and achieve their business functions, that opens up risk. But using mobile device management, you can enforce enforce policies that ensure that you're not putting your business at risk when that's the case. And so we think this is really relevant, particularly now, and a lot of companies are seeing value in those capabilities. Another one is Windows Virtual Desktop. So not many people may know about this, but inherent with certain licensing types with Microsoft 365, same as before, you're licensed for Windows 10, and Microsoft Azure rolled out a new service offering, which is Windows Virtual Desktop. So this is where basically you can have your whole, client desktop run in Microsoft Azure and just delivered to your computer. So instead of, just logging into your computer and everything is running there, you access a browser and go, and everything's living in Microsoft's data center in this model. So that can be useful for, again, those compliance purposes, for keeping all that data in the same data center and reducing that threat level and that risk, but also increasing, security, but decreasing costs. So we've seen companies, I'll give an example. I think I've got it listed on the next slide. So I'll go ahead and jump to SharePoint, making use of SharePoint Online. So this is another quick way that companies are seeing, hey, let's make better use of the licensing that we have with Microsoft 365. SharePoint is now, one-to-one, a perfect way to replace file servers for most organizations. You can go ahead and just remove that workload and not replace it with anything other than the licensing that you already have, right? So just getting there and making use of Microsoft 365 can take your organization sometimes leaps and bounds ahead and drive efficiencies with your staff. So a couple of those customer examples that I touched on. I'll start with the one on the right since I already started to speak about it. So Windows Virtual Desktops, a company, an example that I was thinking of was leasing laptops. And they, we talked about Windows Virtual Desktop and uncovered that, hey, look, this solution is just going to be much cheaper. They can purchase just thin clients, very light hardware, and then run most of those workloads in the cloud, even at the desktop level, right? So this was an immediate cost savings. Even, they just purchased those thin clients or were able to utilize old hardware that was no longer suitable for kind of driving the full function, but was good enough to access those desktops in Azure. So that was a huge win for that organization. And on the left, migrating from G Suite. So those enhanced capabilities with Microsoft 365, like the mobile device management, and further capabilities like advanced threat protection and all of this power that's built into this platform. We were taking a look with an organization that was running G Suite, and moving to Microsoft 365 allowed them to deprovision and get rid of a ton of this other licensing that would become redundant when moving to Microsoft 365 with single sign-on, security software, et cetera. So overall, even though the Microsoft 365 licensing was a little more expensive individually than the G Suite licensing per user, at least on paper, overall is a 60+% cost reduction with their ability to get rid of those redundancies. So the payback time was less than a quarter, even with a full migration. So those are the types of examples where if you're not sure that you're utilizing Microsoft 365 to its fullest, Columbus can come in quickly, take a look, and help you uncover new ways to drive the value out of the applications that you're already paying for. So on to the next point. So we were talking a little bit in the front about business continuity and disaster recovery. So this is another pertinent topic right now for businesses on account of a few things. Number one is ransomware. So ransomware has become rampant. It's the number of cyber attacks are just increasing all the time, and it's a big problem for organizations. There's a couple of ways to mitigate that risk. one of which is making sure you have a strong business continuity and disaster recovery plan in place. And working through this is something that you should work with experts, or if you have the expertise internally, you should review what you're doing, because there are often ways, the technology is advancing all the time. So now there are ways, probably, if you haven't evaluated this in a couple of years, maybe we can get to better numbers on these. So RPO is recovery point objective, right? So if you're backing up every week and something goes down, then you have to go back a week, and all that data in between is lost. Whereas if you're backing up every hour, you only lose an hour worth of data if everything goes down. So that's the RPO side. RTO is recovery time objective. How long does it take you to get back up and running if there is an event? And so on both sides of those coins, we can work with you to identify the best path forward, or you can do this internally. And the reason I bring this to the forefront is a lot of companies are facing challenges around this. So there can be issues and roadblocks, maybe the complexity, there's too much data, etc. So there are a lot of these can get resolved in a cloud model. So I'm not going to harp on all this. It's in the deck that you guys will all have access to. But again, there are a lot of different reasons why this can be valuable. And with the new technologies available, with, for instance, Microsoft Azure Site Recovery and with Azure Backup, a lot of times customers find that they see an immediate cost savings and an increase in their capabilities just by making use of the technology that's available. So a couple of customer examples here. One is using site recovery to protect aging hardware. We're working with a customer whose hardware was starting to be problematic. So just implementing Azure Site Recovery gave some immediate peace of mind that, hey, even if this hardware does fail, we have a path to keep the business running. And eliminating a high-cost second site, for instance, this company was working, they had an effective backup and disaster recovery plan and capabilities, but it was extremely costly because they had a secondary data center. It seemed like a low-cost site because it was repurposed hardware, but they had to put a lot of support and maintenance into that site. So their IT team had to travel back and forth, and it was actually very costly from a support perspective, even though they saw it as a cost savings on the hardware. But taking a look at Azure Site Recovery and Backup, we could achieve better RPO, RTO objectives and reduce costs. So just taking a look at the new technologies, these are kind of some of the areas that we see as being pretty pertinent. And security. So this is another area that's related to kind of the same thing that we're talking about with the ransomware and cyber attack uptick that we've seen, but on the other side of the coin, hey, how do we prevent that? So with Columbus, one of the things that we're trying to get in front of our customers, and we're trying to get everyone possible that we can get to listen to this to do, is take stock of your vulnerabilities. Just understand where are those areas where you're opened up to risk that maybe we could optimize, or you could optimize internally. How can we find ways to reduce the risk of a cyber attack, because the threat is increasing? So the only option that companies have to reduce risk is to look inside and find out where you can shore up some vulnerabilities. One way that we recommend and have available for customers who may not be doing this is a managed vulnerability scan. So we have licensing and technologies and expertise here to come in quickly, take stock of your network and internal and external scan to identify where there may be vulnerabilities and openings, and help you resolve that. And so that's a piece of the puzzle that we just wanted to highlight here. It's related to the path of modernization, because some of those steps may be, hey, let's move some of these workloads to the cloud. But in either case, it's something that we see as pretty critical right now, especially with the way that things are trending with ransomware and cyber attacks and the upticks that are occurring. Now moving on to operationalizing. So wanted to share with you guys, those are a few kind of those tips and tricks that we've uncovered And the way that we've uncovered them is with our technology teams and our service delivery managers working with customers and identifying, hey, here's some good ideas that we see as relevant to you. And that's where I picked those up from, is just conversations that we're having with customers that are part of the ColumbusCare suite. So really what this is a service catalog for Columbus to support our customers from an infrastructure perspective, from an application perspective. Again, the focus here is more on the infrastructure side. But it's kind of the full stack, right? So the way we see it is with Columbus, it's bookended by our service desk and our service delivery management engine, which I'll talk a little bit more about. But we wanted to share this because these are really the critical areas that we see with customers that have to get done if you're going to make full use of that application and the workloads that you're running. Whether it's with a partner, whether it's with Columbus, or whether it's all internally, these are the critical areas. Managing your infrastructure, right? So that's the bottom. I think my headset just died, hopefully. Let me plug it. Okay. So again, managing your infrastructure, that's the bottom layer, but there are a lot of pieces of the puzzle that go into this, right? Making sure things are patched and that you have the capacity and the hardware that you need. Again, that can be eased by making that cloud migration, but in either case, it needs to occur. Solution operations, that's managing and monitoring and quality assurance. So these again are areas that have to occur to make sure that you're achieving the return on investment and achieving the efficiencies and capabilities that are coming out of the applications and the workloads that you guys have invested in. Solution supports. This is kind of a break fix type area. If something goes down, if batches are getting stuck, how do those get resolved? Problem management and incident management. And then this is a critical area that I want to touch on, is solution optimization. So how do you continue to adapt and change and reconfigure and make use of new patches and new capabilities that are being unveiled in those applications? Is that something that you guys are doing consistently internally? Is that something that your internal team has the capabilities to support? Is that something where it makes sense to look outside and utilize a company like Columbus? These are just things to have in mind, evaluating whether or not working with an outside vendor, or if internally you guys have these skills, just making sure that you're staying current on these areas will help you to achieve that level of investment, return on investment, sorry. And again, that can be whether you're sitting in kind of the on-premises model, anywhere that you are on that modernization path. But this is a piece of the puzzle. Getting there is continuing to optimize those solutions. So just again, to touch on infrastructure managed services. So this is the side of the organization of Columbus that I represent. We can handle kind of that bottom layer for you. So whether it's patch management, which is particularly relevant again now with the uptick that we've seen in ransomware and cyber attacks, security and patch management, managing and monitoring network devices, firewalls, etc. So that's the type of work that we're doing with a lot of customers. And again, we think there's value in outsourcing it, or making sure that your internal staff has those capabilities and has that focus on that area. And platform services. Again, this is kind of monitoring, that endpoint management piece. Things like that are all involved with this phase of the puzzle. So those are some of the areas that a partner can bring to the table to help assist you in that modernization path. And I'll just pontificate a little bit about that and help you understand why we think it's valuable to work with a partner on areas like the ones that we're discussing, when the focus of this webinar is, hey, how do we modernize? Well, part of it is working with ColumbusCare and working with Columbus, for instance. I mentioned our expertise internally. We can bring those modernization capabilities and thoughts to the table of, hey, why aren't you guys it looks like you guys can make effective use of these tools that you're already paying for in Microsoft 365. And the other side of the coin is working with a company like Columbus. You guys may have the capability to remove some of the tedium that your internal staff may be facing and allow them to act more strategically and look for the ways to kind of improve those operations and drive modernization internally. So when we're talking about the criticality of operations and kind of this, with any application or new workload, building it is a piece where customers, where folks know to invest pretty significantly most of the time, and that seems like the big area. Well, then post go live, this is where your application is actually running. This is where you're operating. This is where you're getting the return on investment. So this is, again, we think it's critical to support here, and this is where you'll find those efficiencies and capabilities and optimizations. So those are some of the ways that we see ColumbusCare working with customers to help drive, again, this modernization vision, kind of meet you where you are and find those ways to optimize and drive towards, again, the goal of being a modern cloud first company. So again, just to finish with kind of the Columbus vision of why we think we're bringing value to customers like you. Again, we can bring that innovation to the table. We can bring access to talent where potentially we've got staff that has knowledge of specific esoteric types of technology that maybe you're running, whereas it's harder to hire, as significant and wide a pool as we can inherently bring. Flexibility, business cost reduction. So you guys kind of get the picture there. I won't read everything to you, but those are some of the areas of value that we see working with our customers, and again, driving towards that modernization vision. So with that, hopefully those were a few tips of example areas where we've seen, quick ways to drive towards that modernization vision. So a few quick tips for you, as well as, some thoughts around what does that end goal look like. So hopefully there was some value there. Do you guys have any questions? I'd love to answer anything that may be coming from the group.
Hi, Chase. We do have a couple questions here, starting with a question on pricing. How can I estimate pricing here, for example, migrating apps to the cloud?
Sure. Yeah. So that'll be a conversation, right? So there's no silver bullet to say, hey, this is how much it costs to migrate applications to the cloud. But if we look back at the different models available, just to give kind of a thought or an overview here, you may be here on premises and you're looking at, for instance, we'll take like an ERP example. Hey, if you're running Great Plains on premises, and that hardware is aging out or what have you, you need to get it to the cloud and take these migration steps or what have you. Moving into this infrastructure as a service model will probably be a lower upfront cost. It's a little bit easier of a migration path immediately. And then as you move up the path, your implementation costs, those initial costs will probably drive up, but your ongoing costs will come down, right? So infrastructure as a service, this is probably the quickest and easiest way to start and get things relocated from, kind of your server room to the cloud. Software as a service, if it's a new workload, then this is likely the way that you should go. If this is something, hey, we need a new piece of technology that executes this, software as a service is generally the easiest and quickest. But in terms of a migration process, if you're moving a legacy workload to a new software as a service model, that's going to take some more upfront work, but unlock generally a lower cost ongoing over time. In terms of those costs, they can vary extremely widely, but it totally depends on what you're looking to move and kind of what the current state is and which side of this you'd like to be on. Talking about just the models, Microsoft 365, there are a number of different pricing options. based on the configurations and what's available. But you can kind of take a blended approach and get different licensing for different users in your organization. So one thing that another way that we've helped customers is come in and kind of right size the licensing model, bump some users to maybe lower tiers of licensing, bump some up that can make use of the capabilities unlocked there. But again, that licensing model is per user. On Azure, it's kind of per server based on the infrastructure, similar to an on-prem model, but that cost gets turned into an operating expense instead of a capital expense. So again, those are just some highlights there. We can always absolutely discuss the specifics of pricing for any applications you may be looking to move.
Thanks, Chase. We have another question. We have an IT vendor, but they aren't bringing options like this. Can Columbus work alongside them?
Yes, yeah. So we frequently work with organizations where maybe they have an IT vendor, maybe they've had someone running their infrastructure for years. So we can always come in and find ways to help and bring the expertise, even if there's someone else involved, and or we can kind of help start that journey. And ultimately, I mean, if it becomes the case that Columbus can be your one-stop shop, we'd love to. However, if you guys, obviously that's not always going to be the case, and we're happy to work alongside other vendors that you may have in place and keep things moving.
Thanks, Chase. If we have any other questions, please enter them now. Otherwise, we can get started wrapping up and give a few minutes back to your day here. So let's wait a minute here and see if we have one more question. All right. If there are no additional questions, I'd like to thank you all for attending today's presentation. You can feel free to reach out to us at us-marketing@columbusglobal.com if you'd like to discuss any of this any further, and we can help get you in touch with our presenter today. And thank you, Chase, so much for giving us such a good overview of infrastructure modernization. That concludes our webinar. Thanks again, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.